couple of technical pieces, which if folks have been joining the other couple sessions, you'll be familiar with. But if you're joining for the first time, also helpful to sometimes get a sense of how we'll be engaging in space. So just know that you're welcome to keep your mics on mute for the moment so that audio comes through on my end. You are, though, welcome to kind of ask questions throughout, whether in the chat or coming off mic as well to kind of share thoughts. Just for bandwidth, if your video be off for the moment, you're welcome to have it off. And you're also welcome to use the rename function available on Zoom by hovering over to the bottom and using the rename function. You're welcome to ask questions throughout. So as Sherilyn's mentioned, this session is being recorded, so I won't read out your names, but I'll read out the question that you have put forth. So if you're here for application strategies, further ed workshop, you're in the right spot. A brief introduction to who I am. So my name is Joanne. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a career educator over at Career Exploration and Education. So I help support in workshops like these, but also do support in other ways, such as one-on-one advising and also other workshops and at-large programming like career fairs that you would see happening on campus during the month of October and also February. Sherilyn, do you want to introduce yourself there?
Yes, so my name is Sherilyn, and I am the career advisor at Trinity College. And after this, if you do have any questions further when it comes to anything that is application specific, you're welcome to email me, or you can send a message in the chat. That's totally fine. Or you can connect with me through the registrar's office. Just send an email through there and they will connect you with me through booking an appointment with me. But I will turn it back to Joanne.
Thank you so much, Sherilyn. And as we connect here in community today, I would also like to acknowledge where we are currently situated. So we wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credits. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. And as a settler to this land, it often compels me to think about ways in which I can support programming, specifically for Indigenous folks, and specifically ways in which I can both learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that often invites me into a space of arts to engage in that form of learning. So supporting Indigenous artists. There is, I know summer's a bit whiles away, but there is an amazing art festival that happens at Fort York every year, where there are several Indigenous vendors. So do invite folks to check that out once more news becomes available, or perhaps the next time we connect. I can also share a little bit more as well. And that usually happens over the summer at Fort York. I also recognize too that we may be calling in from different lands here today. So I'm sharing 2 links in the chat for folks to have a look through when you have a moment. So the first is Whose Land, and the second is Landmark. Whose Land is more broadly North American based, and Landmark is internationally based. Both share insights into the history and contemporary issues that Indigenous communities currently face, given the treaty rights that they are still negotiating today. So I invite you to learn a little bit more about that when you do have a moment as well. If you would like to also learn more about land acknowledgements and the role of land acknowledgements in opening space, would also invite you to visit indigenous.utoronto.ca as well. And as we continue to be in community, recognizing that we may be from communities that we associate part of and communities that we are not associated part of, that's important for us to ground ourselves in a shared responsibility between everyone in the space. And we strive to create an accessible space that reduces the need for you to disclose a disability or impairment for the purposes of gaining an accommodation. And doing this together, we strive to welcome disability and the changes it brings into our space. And this is from the AODA office at the University of Toronto. So I just wanted to hold space for a quick 30 seconds in case folks wanted to share if there was anything you would need in this moment to engage in today's space or today's virtual space. If there are any access needs that we could address as a group to support your engagement. So you're welcome to private myself or Cheryl Lynn, and I will give it a full 30 seconds there for folks in case you wanted to send a quick message through. So know that this is an ongoing invitation for you to share up in case there's anything we can do to support your participation today. And know that you will receive a copy of the slide deck after today. So you're welcome to also have access to everything that's shared in hyperlinks. And you're also welcome to turn on closed caption at any time by hovering over to the bottom of your screen and clicking the CC icon. And if you need any support in that, you're welcome to again private message yourself or Cheryl Lynn to support with that as well. And as we continue to build community before we head into the workshop, is that the student life, the vision of student life at the University of Toronto is driven by a mission to enrich the university experience for and with students by fostering learning, growth, connections, community, and support. Career education seeks to do this through a commitment to equity, diversity, inclusion, access, belonging, and reconciliation as we navigate career conversation and skill development while simultaneously recognizing that career education is limited in its grounding in a Euro-Western worldview. So you're welcome to jot down an idea or thought as to what we can each do today to contribute to an equitable and inclusive space. So I will give it also 30 seconds there. For this, we won't be sharing it publicly, so you will be keeping this one to yourself. And ongoing invitation. So we welcome feedback throughout in case there's anything we can do to support you. You're also welcome to reach out to our Career Center email after this workshop in case you had anything you want to share up with us as well. So yeah, feel free to connect afterwards, but also connect during this time period that we have today. And in how we'll be engaging, there are going to be a series of shared learning in terms of curriculum that's been built to kind of go through application strategies, particularly for further ed programs, as well as an open discussion and Q&A throughout. So you're welcome to ask questions in a moment. If it is something that I know will be coming up in a future slide, I might save and bookmark that question for then. Or if I know that the question might be better served and answered or resource after today's session, then I will also send out additional resources to better fully answer your question or bookmark it towards the end. All that to say, really welcome questions throughout. Our agenda today is going to be centered. Oh, I think my slides are going on every other slide, so I'm going back there. But our agenda is going to be focused on two key learning. The first is to identify and articulate the different components of applying to graduate school. And I recognize that folks might be looking at a number of different programs, a number of different trajectories in terms of professional or research-based programs. So I appreciate that there are nuances there. As well as identify resources for applying to graduate study in relation to your academic, personal, and career development as well. In terms of how we'll be kind of going through today's content, we will be kind of speaking to investigating each program to learn more about each, really emphasizing the role of, reading through content and making sure that you do understand what the stated requirements are. And we'll be doing a little bit of demystifying certain terminology. If you've been to our resume and cover letter workshops, part of this workshop will be familiar-ish at the beginning, but there is new content to share as well as really encouraging folks to have agency in terms of learning more about the faculties you are interested in, learning about the faculty, the courses, the industry in itself. So what life after graduate school might look like, folks who have followed a similar trajectory. And also, we have examples of CVs and resumes, which are oftentimes one of the most requested documents within the graduate admissions process. So we will be going through a little bit of that as well. So this slide might be familiar to folks, again, if folks have been to our resume and cover letter workshops, but it is really, really helpful to distinguish between what a CV is versus a resume. So a CV is an academic document that is really geared towards listing out your scholarly achievements. It's intended for academics in your field. There is a little bit more of a strict formatting with it versus a resume, which is usually based for a potential employer. And the thing is, either or might be requested from the programs you're applying to. So if you are applying to more of a professional program, for example, an MEd, for example, you might be requested to submit a resume. Whereas if you're applying to a research-based program where there might be also funding associated with it, such as a thesis-based route, then you may be requested for a CV. If you are ever in doubt as to what kind of document they are requesting for, because the terms do get used interchangeably, I really do recommend reaching out to the admissions office just to get the clarity if there are any requirements around the documents. So that way you can also best position yourself as a strong candidate. A couple of key guiding principles, making sure that both documents are a representation of whom you are, as well as just formatting in terms of not having small mistakes, having clear, consistent formatting, and making sure that you do that copy edit as well. So although there is the common divide between a curriculum vitae or CV and a resume, there is a newer concept where you can take kind of the best of both worlds and have it geared towards your further ed application. Again, it kind of says enough in terms of making sure you do have a look through the application requirements of the school program listed, along with the documents they're asking for, especially because, again, these terms are used interchangeably. But what's helpful to remember is the purpose of you submitting this document and who the intended audience is for. So having this in mind allows you to know what experience you will need to feature and where you can provide evidence that certain experiences have prepared you for the program. So do you have the academic preparation needed to succeed in the program? If this is a research stream graduate program which requires a thesis, then you may need to demonstrate that you have worked on a research project before, or you've written major research papers. So think about what your previous research experiences have been and where you have presented in conferences or any publications. If it is a professional program, i.e. one with an internship or placement, that might require for you to demonstrate some level of career experience, whether it was co-curricular experience that you've engaged in or part-time or volunteer work as well. So we'll be going over components of a CV first, and then a little bit around like a resume, followed by the statement of intent. Oh, that's me. So for a CV, this is a list of different sections you might want to consider including on your CV application. So the first is your award section, which would entail things like relevant coursework that you've done. And if you are listing out coursework, making sure that you don't list out the course code, but that you also list out the course title within it. Indicating any activities that have defined or shaped your interests, any awards, scholarships, bursaries that you were able to successfully receive as well. With this, you do want to include a note around what the award title was, the year it was received, and also in brackets next to the award name, what the amount was that you received, especially if there was monetary amounts associated with it. Under each award, you want to also include 1 to 2 lines that is italicized as to what the award was for. So that way, someone who might not be as familiar with the procedure of the award is familiar with why you received it. And it could be as simple as something like demonstrated leadership experience in the areas of X. And this is usually information available in your award letter or also potentially on the award website as well. GPA might be a decision that folks choose to include, and it's really personal preference at that point when it comes to the GPA. So what I mean by competitive is that if it is tied to something that you want to bring attention to. So if you are on the dean's list, for example, or if you're graduating with high distinction, listing your GPA might also help indicate that as well, but really a personal preference because folks will have access to your transcripts afterwards. Class projects, presentations usually fall under your experience section. So moving on to research experience, this really encompasses a lot in terms of any lab work you've done, work study, undergrad thesis projects, if you volunteered in the lab before or done cross course research projects in terms of research methodology. That might be something you want to highlight. Any employment that is relevant for the admissions committee to know in terms of placements, practicums, internships, as well as any presentations you delivered for conferences too. If you do have any publications at the moment to kind of share to the committee too, that's also where you would include it. Do make sure to follow the appropriate citation style for your discipline or program. In most cases, it will most likely be APA, but again, there might be MLA formattings or other formattings depending on the program you're applying to. Do make sure to list it in terms of reverse chronological order. And then with publications, you do want to prioritize peer reviewed because you are applying to a graduate program, perhaps for the first time in terms of demonstrating your competency for graduate programs. There is sometimes no great expectations around having already published in a peer-reviewed article. So if you even done publications in terms of writing blogs or for student newspaper, for example, that it also would demonstrate the capacity to engage with an audience in written format. So that's a high level overview of the CV sections and what you might choose to include under each. In terms of the ordering, it is important. So I have listed out a potential way for you to order the CV here. You would usually begin with your education section and only include post-secondary education, followed by any honors and awards, and then any research interests or teaching interests that you might have. This might be particular research fields that you're interested in or research methodologies that you'd be interested in exploring. So that's something you could also indicate there. From there, you would also indicate your experiences, and it usually falls into 4 different buckets. So research, teaching, professional, academic, and administrative experience. For research, that pretty much encompasses any course projects, or if you were able to do research work in a lab, for example, you might include that there. For teaching, that could also expand out to things like tutoring, for example, being a mentor. That might be also something you include there. Professional would be any career-related experiences that you have had that might be relevant for the field. So if you're interested in, for example, say pursuing trying to think like public policy, for example, and you've done past work in terms of looking at a course union constitution, you might include that under your professional experience. And then lastly, academic and administrative experiences would more so entail any contributions you've made to your specific departments, in this case Trinity, or to your graduate department or to your undergraduate department as well. So those are different templated experience sections you could use, but you might also switch it up depending on your goals and what you want to communicate to the admissions committee. In terms of publications, again, I kind of went through that in terms of prioritizing peer reviewed. You might also include things like conferences, academic associations, languages could also be included here too. And this could be particularly helpful if you are looking into research that would require an international scope where you might need to be fluent in multiple languages to read the articles, to communicate, to conduct interviews, for example. So that might be something to keep in mind for you to list. References, I would say, are optional to be listed on a CV for the most part, because for your graduate program, they will have a separate section for you to indicate who your referees are. And you don't want to list it there necessarily, because you want to make sure as well you have a bit of flexibility in terms of changing up the referees in case you decide to change who your references might be. So here's an example of a CV from our friends over at UBC, and you can kind of see how they've gone ahead and structured their CV. I've also pasted the link in case you want to have a look at more examples as well. But kind of similar in terms of what I shared of having education section listed out, listing out your thesis if you complete an undergrad one, along with your research interests, scholarships. As you can see, they kind of left out what the scholarship was for. So making sure you do include that descriptor within that section too. Publications, presentations, and languages are listed there as well. So there are a lot more examples within the UBC repository, but there's also a lot of examples that we have, and also folks from other universities as well. So again, you'll have access to the slides afterwards for the CV, so you can have a look through it afterwards if you want to get some ideas of what CVs could look like when you're applying to graduate school. So shifting gears a little bit, still around the notion of the kind of brief summary of who you are, whether through a CV or through a resume. We'll kind of go through what sections you might expect for a resume or a resume. So from here, again, you might gear towards having a profile, quick summary of who you are, what you're interested in terms of interests. Your education section, again, will primarily focus on your undergraduate degree, along with any relevant courses, activities that have shaped your interests. You might also include things like scholarships under here, class projects, and experiences under your education section. For the relevant experience, this is different from the CV because you might choose to organize it according to relevant experience and then additional experience, or also employment experience, volunteer experience, community, and extracurricular. So with here, you just want to make sure that you do highlight the transferable skills that would be needed of you when you're in that program. And then lastly, you might include any certificates that you've taken. So if you're taking a Coursera course, you might indicate what the certificate ID is, course code, and then the year that it was given to you as well. In terms of a resume as well, you do want to include descriptors such as your accomplishment statements. So these are essentially bullet points to describe your experiences and the key learnings and results. So you would start off with an action verb, and on the next slide there are a list of different action verbs you might consider, but do make sure to select ones that have active verbs such as analyze, collaborated, research, as opposed to not active verbs like helped, assisted, was responsible for. So you might opt out of using those ones. What you did, so the task that you undertook as part of your role. This is usually the language in the job description, and it simply describes the task being completed. And the purpose or impact. So the purpose of your work, thinking about why you performed the task that you're describing, how did it help you, your research team, your professors, your organization. So what was the impact of that? So as promised, the next slide is just a list of action verbs you might consider incorporating within your resume or resume. And the next slide over here is an example of how you might go about structuring it on your resume. The accomplishment statements are typically not used in a traditional CV, but for the purposes of graduate studies, you might incorporate this within your CV because they do emphasize transferable skills. So you can see how, depending on the kind of positions you're in, you might kind of really aim to quantify some of your statements. So that way it's really clear to the reader the scope of the work that you've done, along with the impact that you've had, and that the experiences can draw across a number of different ways and areas, including if you're part of a lab, work study program or in a student club. It's all about how you go about framing it as well. So I have here an example of a resume for someone who is applying to the Master of Finance program. Let's say it's at U of T. So what I want to kind of gauge with folks just quickly is to say, what did you notice with this example? So what is working with this example of Jonathan's resume? And what, yeah, so in terms of formatting, in terms of content, what is working well for them applying to the Master of Finance program? And in case the image here is a little bit blurred, I am also going to share into the chat Jonathan's resume as well from our cover letter and resume toolkit on page 19. But given what we kind of discussed so far in terms of what to consider including on your resume or resume, what's working well? And you can comment on formatting, style, content in the chat, or you're also welcome to unmute as well. And you're going to private message myself or Cheryl in case you wanted to also keep your name confidential as well, in case you would like to as well. So someone mentioned languages as being part of definitely a bonus within the resume or resume. And what's particularly nice here too is that they have indicated their level of proficiency in the language too. So that could definitely for sure be helpful to the admissions folks. So that's definitely one. Maybe a couple I'll point out as well is the fact that they listed their GPA. They've also listed their relevant coursework. And as you can see, they didn't list the course title, but they listed the course name instead. So that's also a plus and bonus for clarity too. As well as you can see with their relevant consulting experiences, they've also provided a lot of accomplishment statements. So it's clear to the admissions folks as to what their role was over at HSBC. So yeah, definitely in terms of applying to the Master of Finance, there is intentionality between how they place certain experiences for sure. So moving on to the last bit of the workshop before we open it to Q&A is the role of a personal statement, statement of intent. So this is usually another document that is requested of you, and it's asked for several reasons. So it highlights your narrative and what has prepared you to undertake the program, explains the alignment between your past and current goals, and also demonstrates that you have thought about what the goal is for the program is and how it fits into your career trajectory. And then particularly for statement of intent for a research-based program, it is also to convey your research interest with focus and clarity. So think big picture when you do consider the personal statement. So think about who your audience is, and your statement should ultimately be an argument for why you are a good candidate for the program at school. So in other words, values, skills, and strengths that you bring to the program. And remember that for graduate research programs, that the purpose of the statement should be to demonstrate your capacity to formulate a research question and illustrate your sense of self with coherence and relationship to the field. The reviewers are trying to assess if you will successfully finish the program. So put differently, they're asking, do you have research ability at the graduate level? On the other hand, professional programs evaluate personal statements that demonstrate a range of experience and prior training that you have had as a professional. It is important that you do elaborate on what kind of experience and what to extent your training was. If you don't have direct professional experience, demonstrate what experiences you have had that prepared you for the program. So professors and practitioners at this point are thinking about you as a future colleague or practitioner, which means that they will assess non-GPA qualities. And so your personal statement can play a role in terms of really letting them know who you are as a candidate. Your personal statement is also an opportunity in your application package for the admissions committee to learn more about you, especially as they're looking through a large number of applications and essays. So they might be doing initial quick sort through to find the best applicants and then later reading some of the personal statements more thoroughly. You'll want your statement to readily engage the readers and to clearly demonstrate what makes you a unique candidate and what sets you apart from the rest of the folks who they're considering. So as you are crafting your statement, you might really consider questions around who you are in terms of why you want to study X at Y university, why you the program align, and what you can contribute to the field as well. So this will involve going back to the program to learn more about what they do, what their values, missions are, who the current professors are, their research area, to help you articulate that you are the best fit for the program. In terms of beginning to write your personal statement, this is a 5-step way to consider in terms of how to prepare, and you might kind of go in between the steps as well. So you start off by first gathering information about the program and area of study at school. So questions related to why this research or professional program, how does it align to your career goals? And then you assess the information to ask, what does it mean for you to apply? What attracts you to your chosen career? What do you expect to get out of it? And then thirdly, going into understanding what you have to offer. So what makes you unique or different from other applicants? What is perhaps a perspective that you bring which is unique? Fourthly, crafting your draft. So starting off with your draft, knowing that it's not your final draft, but you can certainly come back to it and revise it. Developing an outline could be helpful along with beginning to draft and revise the drafts for clarity, correctness, and style too. You do have access to writing instructors to help support you in that area, but also we also support with reviewing grad school applications too. So as a guide, when you are doing your draft, making sure that you do go through to make sure you, excuse me, identify the program that you are interested in, especially if there are multiple programs in the department. Explain why you're interested in it. Articulate what has prepared you to succeed in the program, whether it's research or professional opportunities. Articulate what will lead you to your next career goal and how this will fit into that, and why and how this particular program aligns to your interests and needs. The different types of statements you might encounter are twofold. So you might find yourself encountering an open-ended essay style type personal statement, which are lengthier than question-based statements and tend to have more of a narrative to it. Overall, you do want to communicate things like why you're interested in the program and what past experiences you have that are relevant for the program to know. Question-based statements are ones that have intentional questions that are set out for folks to consider and to respond to. Usually for these ones, I recommend really assessing what the intention of the question is. And so what is the theme that they're asking for? And did you consider multiple examples before choosing one? Oftentimes we'll have a number of different experiences that we might want to choose from, and choosing the best example might not be the first one that you think about. So do take time to think about what experience you want to highlight with regard to the question. For format and style, there are certainly different types of styles that you might find yourself using. And the clue is definitely going back to the application page. So if they are asking for a personal statement or statement of intent, it might be essay questions that have explicit instructions or asking for information. This is often used by programs in medicine, social work, and MBA programs where they give you a specific instruction to follow and look for specific information. So do be sure to read it carefully. On the other hand, autobiographical personal statements are usually asked by law programs with a narrative style. Ultimately, do reach out to former and current students to ask them about the styles of their personal statements so that you can gauge what kind of statement you might want to approach in using. For organizing a personal statement, an outline could be helpful in identifying what your key sections and word choices are. Do ensure that you keep one idea per paragraph as you write. And for the sake of brainstorming, do consider the three areas as what your past, your present, and your future is. So your background experiences are your past, your academic interests are your present, and your career goals are your future. As you begin to ideate what the outline might look like, you may consider a list of questions as you begin crafting your response. So when did you become interested in this career? How did this interest develop? When did you become certain that this is what you wanted to do? And what solidified your decision? So you might have a particular moment that you want to share with the admissions folks. Other questions you might consider are, what are your intellectual influences? What writers, books, professors, concepts have shaped your approach to this field? How has your academic experiences prepared you for graduate or professional school? And what are two or three of the academic accomplishments that have prepared you the most for this? As you begin also reviewing your personal statement, it's important that you do double check our list of common questions and concerns that happen. So firstly, avoiding generalizations or cliches. So this might be starting off with a generic statement such as, growing up, I always knew I wanted to be X, or from the dawn of time, dot, dot, dot. So you want to begin with something that is resonant with your voice and a reflection of whom you are, as opposed to leaning into cliches. You also want to, as well, really evaluate your experiences. So not just what happened, but why was it important and what did you learn from that experience? As you consider graduate school as potential career pathway, it's important to also consider parallel pathways. So if you are interested in a particular goal, know that graduate studies is one part of that, and you might kind of expand that out to other opportunities too, so that you're really weighing all the options that are available to you. So really asking your questions as to what specifically interests you about this career, what other possibilities have you considered, and how similar or dissimilar are they? And parallel planning can be quite helpful because it does prepare you for multiple possibilities in terms of reducing anxiety, opening up career options, and also helping you understand the world of work and identify your transferable skills. So some key action plan items, you might have more questions after today, is recognizing that you might be taking away one solid learning that you'll implement into your next round of writing your grad school application, as well as considering who we talk to. So you do have folks over at Trinity who are amazing, who you should definitely connect with, but also our career services as well would also be supportive in terms of reviewing your CV, your resume, or your personal statement or statement of intent for grad school as well. It's often helpful to bring in the prompts that's asked of you, and we're happy to really review the admissions package with you as well. Do consider the source of information. So reach out to the admissions office, ask them the questions you need to get asked and answered, and also be attentive to timelines in the program. Some programs have a rolling timeline in terms of it's really ongoing in terms of when they would accept applications. Other programs have a fixed timeline in terms of this is the latest date that they would consider. So offering that as a takeaway in terms of managing timelines. So with that, that does bring us to the end of the presentation. So I will stop sharing there. I probably pause the recording too. For any questions that folks might have about grad school application.